J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue.
We'll start the meeting. Welcome to meeting number 32 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 3rd, 2022, the committee is meeting to study anticipated labour shortages in the Canadian transportation sector. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021, members are attending in person or remotely on Zoom.
We have appearing before us as witnesses from the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, Mr. Bruce Rogers, Executive Director. We also have Ms. Julia Kuzelievich, Director, Policy and Communication. From the Canadian Truckers Alliance, we have Mr. Stephen Laskowski, President, as well as Jeffrey Wood, Senior Vice President. From Teamsters Canada, we have Mariam Abu-Dib, Executive Director, Government Affairs, as well as in person here in committee, Mr. Omar Bergan. Did I get that right? Thank you, sir. We will now begin with opening remarks with the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting Bruce and me to speak on this critical issue. Monsieur le Président et Mesdames et Messieurs.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, on behalf of the CIFFA, the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today.
We'd like to compliment the committee for your diligence in chasing these issues, which are so serious and so complex. It means a lot to all of us in the industry that you're looking for any solutions government might provide. The Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, also known as CIFA, represents some 300 regular member firms, from the largest of global multinational freight forwarding firms to small and medium-sized Canadian companies. CIFA member companies employ tens of thousands of highly skilled international trade and transportation specialists. Our members are the front line of Canada's supply chain, managing the majority of freight shipments. But it's important to note that we also represent drayage operators. These are the truckers serving the ports and container terminals where you have seen such congestion in recent years, and the freight brokers who manage the movement of cross-border trade. The human resource problems in the supply chain are critical and are not getting better. Many of the problems are tied up with the frustrations of the supply chain itself. People used to make their money on speed and volume. Today, that's impossible in many areas. The system is, in effect, seized.
We have a short, less than 2-minute video, which one of our members recorded that illustrates a small but contributing part of the problem. A copy of the video has been sent to the clerk. In the video, you would see 65 trucks lined up waiting to get into one of the rail yards in Vaughan, Ontario. This is the equivalent length of approximately 40 football fields. These trucks are trying to return empty containers, which are required to facilitate export trade. It is important to understand that these drivers make their money by moving containers between the rail yards and importers and exporters. As they sit idle, they are losing money. It is hard to recruit new drivers when everyone can see how hazardous a business it's become. Rising fuel and insurance costs only add to the problem. The CIFA member who recorded this told us that he had 8 drivers in line and not one got into the yard that day. Their drivers waited in excess of 5 hours only to have the gates closed due to terminal congestion. By the way, this congestion in Vaughan is actually connected to Canada's west coast. Transport Canada puts significant pressure on the rail providers, terminal operators, and the Port of Vancouver to clear the backlog and ships at anchorage. The rationale was to facilitate the export of grain. We all understand that priority, but the improved flow in Vancouver doesn't indicate that we solve the problems, we just move them further inland to both Toronto and Montreal. So unfortunately, our first suggestion to address workforce shortages is to fix the terrible problems affected by the supply chain.
As parliamentarians, you'll make your own decisions about how interventionist the government should be. Our laissez-faire, market-driven system has worked well for decades, but the transport sector is having trouble resetting itself. The chronic uncertainties that are frustrating consumers are also squeezing the workers, and the problem's not getting better. Last month, we asked the Canada Border Services Agency to consider returning to a clearance system they used until just a few years ago, which allowed goods to be released much more quickly at first point of arrival versus when the cargo has actually arrived at the destination yard. We've copied the letter to this committee's clerk for your information. We want the committee to know we are constantly engaging with the government on measures to alleviate delays. A couple of specifics on developing the workforce. We would urge the committee to engage with training institutions to discover if there are resources they need to up their volumes. Across the Canadian economy, businesses need to temporarily recruit foreign workers to alleviate shortages. We've engaged with Employment and Social Development Canada on the National Occupation Classification System, which undervalues certain critical transportation management roles, thus discouraging immigrant workers from applying to work here. Due to frustrations with the supply chain, employees are leaving this profession, moving to less stressful positions. As a result, our freight forwarding employers are moving to offshore certain functions to aid with the current and future labor shortages. Due to the cost structure that this solution enables, many of these activities will not return to Canada. One of our members commented that offshoring activities have increased from 10% of their workforce up to 25% rather now. Finally, we're supportive of strategies to recruit women into these industries where they are still a small percentage, but we need to recognize that women drivers, for example, in the trucking industry, may have somewhat different lifestyles and responsibilities than their male counterparts. They may be interested in local, but not transcontinental driving. And in the video, there were no porta potties along that long line, a problem for all drivers, especially for women. Thanks to the committee again for your attention to this issue, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Canadian Trucking Alliance. The floor is yours for your opening remarks. You have 5 minutes. Sorry, Mr. Leskowski, I believe that you are on mute.
There we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Please proceed.
And thank you everyone for the invitation. I'm joined today off screen by Mr. Jeffrey Wood, our Senior VP Policy. Today, what we'd like to talk about is who CTA is and issues in the supply chain and solutions. CTA represents about 5,000 trucking companies across Canada, and we employ about 250,000 Canadians directly. One of the questions before the committee today is, what are the implications of the driver shortage in Canada, and what are its solutions? The implications of the driver shortage are being felt by all Canadian businesses and households today. There's an old saying in our sector, if you got it, a truck brought it. That saying is a reflection that over two-thirds of our trade by value, and that almost everything in our workplace or residence was once in a truck, and in some cases, multiple trucks, However, what that saying is really missing is the major economic contributor to our sector and to the Canadian economy, the truck driver, his or herself. In 2022, we are learning as a society, if we didn't get it, it's because we're close to 30,000 commercial truck drivers in Canada today. That's 30,000 vacancies. What that really means is that there should be 30,000 more trucks into the supply chain that aren't there because we don't have people. And what does that mean? It means our export, import market, and our domestic market isn't functioning properly. In late spring of 2022, CTA hired Nanos and Associates to survey a sample of our board of directors. The sample represented about 39,000 trucks, 40,000 employees, and about 2.2 million annual loads. Without question, it was almost unanimous. The number one issue facing our industry and their business is the existing staff shortage and exits and retirements. As the Government of Canada looks to address the supply chain crisis, we remind this committee that by addressing the truck driver shortage, you are addressing all sectors of the economy to help them emerge from the supply chain crisis and the disastrous impacts of inflation. The solutions: improve trucking industry's access to immigration, improve our access to training dollars, stamp out the underground economy, which we refer to as Driver Inc., phased in approach of the 10 paid sick days, and address border concerns. CTA's recommended approach to these issues are reasonable common sense solutions that require no new legislation or special treatment for our sector, but merely an extension of current practices, access to programs, tools and funds provided other sectors, or in the case of the underground economy and Driver Inc., the enforcement of laws and regulations that are currently on the books. Some of these above issues to be going down a very positive road with the Government of Canada. For that, we are very grateful to the various ministries and ministers that we're working with. While other critical matters remain a point of significant concern for our sector, and for all those that rely on reliable, safe, and labor-compliant trucking partners in a time when truck capacity is low. CTA stands ready to work with the Government of Canada to work in a collaborative manner as our sector enters a very tenuous and critical time in its history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. Next, we have Teamsters Canada. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours for your opening remarks.
Hi. On behalf of the 125,000 men and women who are members of Teamsters Canada, I'd like to thank the Chair and the members of the committee for inviting me to speak before the Transportation Committee on the topic of vacancies in the transportation industry. In addition to working in the hospitality, tourism, trade show, and sports entertainment sectors, the vast majority of Teamsters members work in the transportation industry, which includes road, rail, and air transport. Teamsters Canada is Canada's largest logistics and transportation labour union. Let me begin by speaking about the freight trucking industry. Les conducteurs de camions sont un maillon très important de la chaîne.
Truck drivers are an extremely important part of this sector. According to Statistics Canada, over the last 20 years, the occupation of truck driver has become one of the most important professions in Canada, representing over 278,000 jobs in 2016. About 90% of freight shipped in Canada are done so by truck.
Of the sector, we've been seeing for some time that fewer new workers are attracted to truck driving. In conjunction with the median age of drivers rising rapidly, Statistics Canada data also shows very high levels of job vacancies, which have reached over 26,000 vacancies in Q2 of 2022. This level of vacancies was accurately predicted by the Conference Board of Canada almost 10 years ago, and in their 2013 report, they recommended that policies be put in place to increase the attractiveness of truck driving, including by recognizing truck driving as a skilled trade. In addition to ensuring the proper training of drivers and increasing road safety, this would provide incentives for young people to enter the industry, including by helping remove prohibitive licensing fees. Skilled trade recognition would also create easier pathways for entry into the industry so prospective drivers can avoid unscrupulous fly-by-night employers who are cheating vulnerable workers, including new immigrants or temporary foreign workers, by either not paying them what they are owed or engaging in a scam known as Driver Inc., which forces employees to incorporate so the company can skirt labor standards. We're glad the current government has improved enforcement of labor laws with penalties on Driver Inc. schemes, and hope more will be done to protect workers from these types of practices. Il faut cependant rester vigilant.
However, we must remain vigilant. Last spring, an investigation discovered a criminal network in Quebec selling fraudulent driver's licenses to new immigrant aspiring truckers. The scammers took advantage of vulnerable workers and the desperation of an industry which can't find enough workers.
Drivers is a growing crisis of inadequate rest areas, especially in more northern areas in Canada. Drivers describe chronic inadequate access to truck stops, which makes rides longer and exhausting and prevents drivers from getting access to meals. This problem is even worse for women. While there has been an increase of women drivers in recent years, they still remain vastly underrepresented. Safe and welcoming rest stops, including access to showers, would make work much less exclusionary for women. In the rail sector, members report that there's very high turnover within 2 years of initial hires. Rail companies are over 150 years old and have often failed to bring working conditions in line with the current century and with the expectations of a newer generation of workers. Rail workers are still commonly expected to be at the beck and call of management 24/7, whether it be on weekends, holidays, or even when they've scheduled their annual vacation. Workers can often be called in for a 24-hour shift with only a 2-hour notice. Some companies have draconian disciplinary policies whereby they apply a 20-day suspension without pay, which members lose 10% of their annual pay. This, in addition to other measures such as inward-facing cameras, recording workers' every conversation, create an incredibly discouraging work atmosphere which many simply abandon. And lastly, workers in the parcel industry, delivery industry are also often faced with a squeeze on working conditions. In addition to the downward pull of Amazon on working standards across the industry, expected productivity is at levels never seen before. While there was a time when delivery people would expect 80 parcels a day, now the expectation is 140 parcels every day. The entire transport industry must adapt by offering better working conditions if it wishes to attract a new generation of workers, because as soon as a different sector offers them a better life, they will go there instead. Lastly, I will add that when workers are members of unions, they're able to leverage their collective bargaining power to negotiate on a level playing field and improve their terms of employment. It has been shown repeatedly that countries with higher union density have lower levels of income inequality and better working conditions. We need good laws that make the process fairer for workers to join unions. Thank you to the committee for listening to my remarks, and thank you to the parliamentary staff and interpreters for making these meetings possible.
Thank you, Mr. Bergan, and all witnesses for your opening remarks. We will begin today's round of questioning with Ms. Leanne Rood. Ms. Rood, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. I'm from a rural area, and I come from the agriculture sector, and so I understand more than most people how vital the trucking industry is, especially for us to be fed. First and foremost, like, we can talk about everything else in our house, but if we don't have food, we are not in a good situation. And delivering goods, especially food, to grocery store shelves for Canadian consumers is obviously a priority. And I've heard all of the witnesses today talking about shortages, breaks in the supply chain, whether it's at a rail yard, whether it's at the ports, all the way down the chain. It does have an effect, and we've seen that through COVID, seen major food spoilages and shipping containers not arriving on time because trucks were not available to bring the food quickly enough to the distribution centers. And so I'm just curious, and perhaps maybe this is a question for Mr. Rogers, if you can comment on how this labor shortage is leading to increased costs for Canadians for their food supply. And maybe, you know, I think you said that the fuel costs have gone up, and that's one of the things we've seen is fuel costs. Like, and what will the increasing of the carbon tax have on fuel and the cost to ship goods already going forward to our stores?
Yeah, you're bringing up some excellent points, and I won't say costs are just going up in fuel and insurance. They're going up in everything. If you're bringing product in from outside of North America, the ocean line shipping costs have increased tenfold from what they were. And I'm going back 6 months ago to where those costs were. They have now started to come down due to basically a supply and demand situation. So the costs now we're hearing are back to 2018 levels. So that's normalizing to a certain standpoint. But the changing patterns that have occurred through COVID, where the imports have definitely increased coming into North America, that's had a significant effect on congestion. Our ports have not expanded. We have no more land to put the product. So congestion is a part of the supply chain. What we are experiencing now, due to the backlog that was created out of Vancouver and the ships at Anchorage, in order to clear that backlog, they moved the product into central Canada, into Toronto and Montreal. The rail yards used to have, one had 3 yards in Toronto, they now have 9. One had 1, they now have 2, and equally they've expanded into the Montreal area as well. Because of that, containers are being split. We don't know where the containers are. They're just added congestion into these additional yards. Because these yards have opened up as well, the rail have additional expenses. So the rail have changed their demurrage and detention charges. They're now charging really after 24 hours. So they've reverted from 72 hours on demurrage and detention to 72 hours. In addition to that, there is the cost of movement from the rail yard to these additional container yards that have since opened up. And we figure that the average cost for an import container now has increased about $1,500 from what it was prior to this congestion being created. So you're talking about the cost of increases on food. There are increases on everything that is being imported into this country at this point in time due to the congestion issues that have resulted through the supply chain.
Thank you very much for that. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. This crisis has been made worse by the labor shortage crisis, by high inflation, high fuel costs, labor shortages, and some groups that I've met with and groups that we've heard from have brought up that temporary foreign workers may be a solution to some of these problems, but I know from experience in the agriculture sector that TFWs are not a permanent solution, and that there are many logistical and regulatory challenges with bringing them to Canada and obviously ensuring their safety, as the Teamsters have alluded to. So I'm just curious if you believe TFWs are a viable option for the transportation sector, and if we have time, I'd like to hear from the Teamsters just a brief answer as well, please.
I'll be very brief. I'm going to say yes. I think there is significant opportunity to bring foreign workers in on the driving sector. And what we're finding in Canada today is the younger generation are not aspiring to be truck drivers. So we've got to find them somewhere. And I think immigration is the way to go. And I'll defer to my friends at the Teamsters to offer further comment.
Teamsters' position is that we should more consider immigrants who are on a path to citizenship. I think, as you mentioned, temporary foreign workers is a very temporary solution, and we would more like to see, things like having considering the trucking industry or trucking as a skilled trade in order for better training and having the same standards across the country for any immigrant or temporary foreign worker that comes to work those jobs.
Thank you for that. I think part of what we're hearing, though, is that we need to have really good public policy that is compassionate and fair towards new immigrants and attracting people into different skilled trades, because that's good public policy and supporting new Canadians as they try to integrate into Canadian society. So thank you so much for those answers today. I know my time is up, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rood. Next, we have Mr. George Chahal. Mr. Chahal, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all the witnesses for joining us today. Just a little context, I represent Calgary Skyview, which is Northeast Calgary, home to many truck drivers, trucking and logistic companies. So I've had many opportunities to engage through trucking town halls and meet and greets with members of the industry who do a tremendous job across the country. Mr. Laskowski, I want to start with you. You talked about 30,000 trucking vacancies and shortages. What does that look like in a few years from now? If you look at 5 years out, what do you anticipate based on the data? Is your data accurate, and do you think it's reliable that we can project out 5 years from now? And what do the numbers look like then?
The most recent projection that we have with regards to the driver shortage goes out 2 years. And that estimate is 50,000 people short in terms. So what that really means is, as I echo again, that's 50,000 trucks needed in the supply chain that aren't moving and aren't moving customers' goods, whether across the U.S.-Canada border or across Canada.
What part of the workforce do you see retiring over the next 5 years?
Well, we have the oldest workforce in Canada, the largest percentage over the age of 55. And as we all saw with COVID in multiple sectors, that age group rapidly accelerated their retirement plans. And we are seeing that in our sector. So we are short today. We expect to be short 50,000 in another 2 years. And we are dealing with the other factor of having one of the oldest workforces, in Canada.
Thank you. Mr. Bergen, you said looking at drivers who are citizenship. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that remark that because many of our drivers are permanent residents and or citizens, and many do come as foreign workers as well. So just if you could be clear for the record, just in case you misspoke, or is that what you were intending to say?
That is what I was intending to say, yes. I mean, you're saying that currently a lot of drivers are permanent residents or on citizenship path. Correct. I mean, that's great. I think, if you look at the jobs kind of as, if you look at it from a market perspective, there's a high need for them. So from our perspective, it's because these jobs are unattractive to most people living in Canada or a lot of the new generation. So we need to find ways, or the industry has to find ways to make them more attractive, whether by offering better work-life balance, better pay, better pensions. But we hear constantly that a lot of people will take up the job and after a while say, you know what, this is, I can't do this. It's not worth it. I'm constantly away from friends and family. So we think that the onus should be on the industry to examine why they can't attract people because there are workers everywhere. We have, there's an unemployment rate. We don't have 100% employment in Canada. So I think it's just a matter of attracting them, people who might have gone to other industries where they felt like they could have a better life.
Yeah, and I just wanted to be clear, just so there's no misconceptions, because many foreign workers do come and do apply for to become a permanent resident and then citizenship. So that's a part of that process. And I'm grateful for all those who go through that because it's important for the industry. A question for the CTA on truckers' rights and looking at the different provinces across Canada and different experience rules and insurance requirements. Do you believe that we need to have some sort of maybe a Bill of Rights for drivers? And maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Bergen, on that, and then maybe go to the Trucking Alliance.
So your question is if there should be a Bill of Rights for
Well, to protect drivers' rights. We've seen a number of challenges in the Peel region, a number of stories from the Toronto Star, in Alberta as well. How do we ensure that those drivers are trained, but also their rights are protected as drivers and not taken advantage of such things as you've talked about the Underground Economy Driver Inc. And how different provincial rules across the country may be contributing to that?
Well, I think what we've seen, and the STAR report that you referred to was an excellent reporting. We've seen citizens groups step in because out of frustration that, the process where they would grieve, these members, first of all, they aren't unionized, so they don't have a union they can go talk to and ask for representation. But even the process through the federal labor laws is very lengthy and onerous, and they do not see any resolution. And so they've taken to very non-traditional means of just simply publicly shaming employers who are, not even paying them what they're owed. So I think something that would help is either if they joined a labor union, they would have an institution that protects them from such practices. But in absence of that, I do think that there should be better enforcement of the rules so that companies aren't so tempted to abuse their workers.
Mr. Laskowski, would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. We are strong advocates and supporters with regards to this particular issue, and I'm glad you asked the question. We believe that whether it's training dollars for people that are Canadian citizens currently going through programs or new people to Canada coming through various immigration programs, that we need programs for trucking companies, but we want them screened. They should be known employers that have the highest work standards, that are committed to safety, so we ensure that these needed workers, both people who are already Canadian citizens or permanent residents or temporary foreign citizens, they go to work for trucking companies, the thousands of compliant trucking companies, to ensure that their labor rights and their working rights are taken over. And this can be done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chahal, and thank you very much, Mr. Laskowski. Next, prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Xavier Barcelou-Duval.
Mr. Xavier Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Laskowski, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. In your opening statement, you talked about the underground economy and the trucking sector, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us more about that. I'm not really familiar with that.
It starts out, it's referred to as a personal services business. It's a technical term, but really what it is, it's a misclassification scam. And what this does is it allows trucking companies to organize drivers. It doesn't allow them now, because they misclassify them, to pay them overtime, to give them holiday pay, to give them severance. And these companies then are void and allow themselves to be carved out of payroll taxation. It also allows companies and drivers to skirt income taxes. It becomes a black hole in our sector. And it's not a small black hole. It's estimated between 20 and 30%. CTA commissioned a study using Statistics Canada data that showed that our sector in cities like Calgary, Winnipeg, Southern Ontario, Montreal, and Halifax have the fastest growing what's called zero-based employee companies than any other sector in Canada. And it's not even close to anybody second to us. This is Driver Inc., and it's got to stop. And what it's doing to other companies now, over 50% of drivers are going to companies across Canada and saying, I want to be paid the incorporated model. I don't want to be on your payroll. If CRA doesn't step up soon, we have a big problem. We are going to have a major, major problem. And our industry wants this stopped. The compliant drivers want it stopped. And the drivers that are being abused want it stopped. We need the assistance of Government of Canada very quickly on this issue, and particularly CRA. Minister O'Regan in ESDC has already said he will step up and has disavowed this in the House. But we need action, and we need it quickly.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bergen, would you like to add something? I think the Canadian Trucking Alliance has done an outstanding job on this issue. I regularly consult their resources. It really is a black mark on the industry. These companies have found a way to avoid compensating, as Mr. Laskowski has said, to avoid compensating for overtime or holiday pay. It's a serious problem. And it's just getting worse. As you said, there are so many companies right now who have a lot of trucks but zero employees. So the Canada Revenue Agency says that if it walks like an employee and talks like an employee, it is an employee. So we have to apply labor laws here, and these companies are evading them. Mr. Laskowski, a little earlier, you talked about the aging driving workforce and that it's hard to attract younger drivers. Do you think that a solution might be to build in incentives to retain experienced workers, perhaps through tax incentives or other types of incentives that the government could put in place?
As an alliance, we really haven't looked at that aspect from the Government of Canada. Other provincial associations may advocate down that avenue. Our board hasn't examined that particular issue. I can assure you this, that driver pay has gone up over 20 to 30% over the last 2 years. Incentives have gone up. Companies work with their drivers to pick routes that they want to go to. So there are market solutions to this, and they're being worked on. But what we really need from the government of Canada. And our number one priority with regards to what we'll call incentives is really training dollars to help onboard people onto the trucks very quickly. Just because you have a driver's license that qualifies you to operate a tractor trailer, that doesn't mean you're ready to work in the trucking industry. And that comes with costs, significant costs. Many sectors have what's called apprenticeship light type onboarding programs. We have zero access to those types of programs and those dollars, and that needs to change. That's the programs that we would like to see move forward with the government of Canada and trucking industry. And again, let's not reward the underground economy and give dollars to those companies. Let's go give the dollars to vetted trucking companies that practice safety practices and maintain high labor standards.
Merci beaucoup, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Backrack. Mr. Backrack, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. This is an interesting and important topic. And I wonder if I could pick up where Mr. Barcelou-Duval left off on this Driver Inc. scheme, something I'm not very familiar with, but it seems like a serious issue. I wonder if either Mr. Laskowski or Mr. Bergen have thought about the specific remedy that's needed. Is it a legislative remedy? Do we need to make changes to the Income Tax Act? How does the government prevent this kind of scheme from happening? Or is it simply a matter of increasing enforcement, CRA resources to go out there and do compliance? Because it seems, I know in other sectors there are pretty clear definitions of what constitutes an employee versus a contractor in terms of providing the facilities of work. If you're a contractor, you have to provide your own office and your own equipment, that kind of thing. Is this a matter of those rules not being consistently applied across sectors? Is it a matter of not enough proactive enforcement? And are there changes that we can advocate for through our report that would help address this situation in a legislative way? Maybe we could start with Mr. Laskowski, and then Mr. Bergen could add his thoughts.
Sure. Thank you for that question. Really, sometimes life is more complicated and simply sometimes it's really easy. And in this one, it's enforce the laws you have currently on the books. There's no legislation required. From a CRA perspective, it's enforce the laws on the books. From an ESDC perspective, ESDC is out in the field. I believe the Teamsters mentioned that earlier. And companies are being addressed. We'd like to see, and I'm sure the Teamsters would, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but to make sure that these companies then that are found guilty in violations from an ESDC standpoint, make sure every single driver receives their back pay. Every single one of them that's entitled to it. With regards to the CRA, ESDC is discovering dozens of companies in gross violation. Our request is really simple to the CRA. Why aren't you seeing the same companies and auditing the same companies that ESDC is finding gross violations of Driver Inc.? To us, it's a matter of enforce the law. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, we agree. We have heard that, up till now, there's been very little enforcement. When there has been, it's been just a slap on the wrist, very small financial penalty. And I think any enforcement has to really be, a lot of drivers are lured into this. They're just seeking, they're seeking work and pay and a paycheck, and they get told by the company, you can make way more money if you just incorporate. We do it all the time. And so workers get drawn into this, and then further down the line, they figure out that it's not something that should have been done. So we think that employers are by now, most of them are aware that this is a scheme that by which they're bypassing labor laws, and we think that penalties should be placed on the employers for engaging in such practices.
Thanks, Mr. Bergen. And following up on that. And maybe this is self-evident, but does this underground economy create downward pressure on overall conditions of work across the sector?
Absolutely, and we hear members telling us about it. Members who've over time, organized and have solid working contracts say that their employers will tell them that they're having trouble competing with the companies that are cheating. And as a result, they start telling the workers that have decent working conditions that they need to consider cutting down on them because they can't compete with the companies that aren't following the rules. So it penalizes both, workers who organize their workplaces and negotiated solid contracts, and good working conditions, and it also penalizes companies that actually respect their workers and follow the rules.
Mr. Bergen, you mentioned unionization and the advantages of having the protection of a union. And I wonder, across the sector, do you have numbers in terms of the percentage of unionization? And do you have a sense of whether there's a gap in both the ability to recruit to unionized versus non-unionized positions and the compensation for those positions? There must be statistics on how truck drivers are paid at unionized and non-unionized employers.
There definitely are. I don't have any of those statistics on hand. It goes without saying that when you get the opportunity to negotiate, you get good working conditions, you get better working conditions, and you have the leverage of a labor union in order to obtain those. And especially with things like enforcement, that's the two things that unions can do for workers is negotiate contracts and enforce those contracts. And throughout my work experience and even my personal life, workers who face bad employers without the protection of a union, it's a lot more work to get those employers to follow the rules and treat workers with respect. And as I mentioned, there was it was actually much easier earlier in the century to form unions, and a lot of provinces have put in place two-step laws for unionization to allow employers to break down unionization drives. And we're seeing now some provinces, notably in BC, that have the card check law, which makes it a lot easier and more fair for workers to organize their workplaces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bergan, and thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And permit me, if you will, to editorialize for a moment. And I know all members of the committee will probably agree, because we're going to get to the report writing stage of this, obviously, after a few meetings. But the title of the notice of meetings that anticipated labor shortages in the Canadian transportation sector, and I would suggest that if we're talking about 30 to 50,000 shortage on truck drivers, it's not anticipated, it's now, and I think we've heard that from the witnesses, and anticipated implies perhaps a lack of sense of urgency, and so I'm sure we agree, but I'm just going to make that point right up front. We heard about temporary foreign workers and pathway to citizenship and encouragement of immigration skilled trades as potential solutions to the shortage that we have currently of truck drivers. And I know that, and we've all witnessed, and I spoke to businesses as recently as last Friday who've had issues getting skilled trade workers through the IRCC processes, through the various federal government processes. What used to take 3 months or less is now 10 months and often worse. Maybe you can elaborate on how we can reduce some of the hurdles as a federal government to get workers in faster, whether they be through a temporary foreign worker process or the other various immigration streams. So either the freight forwarders or the transportation CTA who reference that, or certainly the Teamsters, either one wants to comment.
It's hard when I'm online. I'll jump in. Sorry, folks. I just want to applaud Minister Fraser, who's already made a significant announcement. The change isn't in place, but the trucking industry and specifically truck driver will become a part of the express entry program. That was a significant change and a significant announcement. Some details still have to be worked out on this, but what we'd like to see in that program is drivers made a priority within the express entry program for 2023. And again, we're working with the folks at the express entry program to ensure that the drivers brought through the program end up with trucking companies with the highest labor standards and safety standards. So we applaud Minister Fraser and his team for announcing this direction. And we very much look forward to working with Minister Fraser and his team in a collaborative manner to make sure that drivers are a priority in 2023, and we ensure to the best of our ability that these people coming to Canada end up with labor compliant trucking companies, and they don't end up being abused like what you read in that Toronto Star article.
All right. In terms of staff retention and staff recruitment, because obviously those are two different things. You know, and you've referenced the person from the CTA, the number one priority being training, which training funds, which makes sense from the staff recruitment perspective. Maybe what are the top three things that can be done, both in terms of retaining existing drivers and then recruiting new drivers to the process?
Mr. Chair, to the chair, is that question for CTA or for the panel?
Sorry, I referred to your previous comment about training dollars.
Okay.
Maybe you can elaborate on the top few things from both retention and recruitment perspective.
So currently, the trucking industry has zero access to training dollars, other than through what I'll refer to, and not trying to belittle them, but more one-off programs. What we would like to see is almost an apprenticeship-like program where once an individual goes through what's called mandatory entry-level training in our industry, really what that does is it gives you your ability to drive either what we call in our industry a straight truck or a tractor trailer. Really what is needed now, especially with the 30,000 individuals short, are training dollars to onboard people. Just because you have the license doesn't mean you're ready to drive a truck. So what we want to see is, again, good companies rewarded with training dollars to help them on board, because typically you'll need two people in the truck. You're not going to put that person on the long haul. You start them off on shorter hauls. This is all to make sure that things are done safely and that the people are integrated into our industry in a safe manner and they stay in our industry. So really what this is about is, number one, let's make the dollars available to our industry to help onboard these people. Number two, let's make sure that these dollars go to companies with the highest labor standards and safety standards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laskowski, and thank you very much, Mr. Muse. Next, prochainement, nous avons Mr. Iacono. Mr. Iacono.
Mr. Iacono, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being there today. My first question is for Mr. Bergen. In your view, where are the most critical staff shortages in your sector of transportation? The number of vacant positions in the trucking industry is the one we've been talking about longest. As I said, the Conference Board of Canada produced a report in 2013, and even back then, they foresaw this shortage. And this was well before the pandemic and the supply chain crisis. In that report, they said the job had to be made more attractive as well. There's a lot of pressure in the rail sector, and I've been told that we don't have the exact statistics, but I've been told that 100 people are hired and 2 years later only 20 are left because working conditions, as I said, are suffocating because cameras are constantly on employees and there are other arbitrary rules which companies want to apply. For instance, employees are not allowed to use cell phones, even if it's for security reasons. Oh, does that apply to people working in the container shipping business? By truck or by rail? Either. Is it the same problem there? I just want to have an idea which sector has the greatest need. And I'd also like to know is if there's no solution, where will problems be greatest? Can you perhaps be a little more specific about the sector which faces the greatest problems? Well, it's hard to say. We didn't focus as much on the shortage of workers in the rail industry. We focused more on the shortage of drivers in the trucking industry. Statistics Canada comes out with numbers on a quarterly basis. Last time I checked, the number was 26,000 vacant driving positions. So it is the second biggest shortage in any sector, in all sectors studied by Statistics Canada. So I think the trucking business is worse off right now. Mrs. Aboudib, in your view, what is the number one thing to do to fix this worker shortage? Should it be to provide more training? Would it be to bring in specific immigrant workers? Would it be automation? What would you have to suggest to this committee today? Well, thank you, Mr. Iacono, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to address the worker shortage in the trucking sector. We need to approach this industry in a more holistic way, and we need to understand that it's important to make this sector more attractive to young people and young women. There are unemployed women now who are looking for work. And here we have a sector where there is a shortage of workers. So why don't we invest in training? And if we are to make this business more attractive, it means we have to value it more. And if we are to do that, we have to recognize that these drivers are professionals. The Association of Employees and the union are on the same page, and this is meaningful. We have to recognize the sector as being a professional sector. It's not anyone who can just get their trucking license and get behind the wheel of a truck. There are apprenticeship trainings, there's programs rather, there's training that needs to be given, just as is the case in the construction industry. In the construction industry, those jobs are valued, and we have to value jobs in the trucking business as well. Thank you, Mr. Iacono and Ms. Aboudib. Now, Mr. Barsalou-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll begin with Mr. Laskowski once more. Now, until now, we've talked at length about the shortage of workers, but to fix this problem, or to fix any kind of problem in this matter, sometimes the solution lies in doing the same amount of work with fewer workers. So my question to you is, can we use technology to lessen the need for workers? I'm asking this question in good faith. I understand that we don't have driverless trucks yet, but there might be other solutions, or there might be something I don't know.
Thank you for the question. I don't think the issue here is about technology per se. That what we're looking at technology this way. Driver assist technology are making trucks safer in terms of what we'll say the truck itself, the vehicle. If you are aware of how to use that vehicle in a safe manner, have given proper training and a proper onboarding, we can move the economy safer. And I think that's what the most important part of the technology of technology is. So if we have a properly trained driver, one that's been onboarded in a safer truck with more modern technology, and that's when CCA rates to encourage more technology coming onto the trucks could be used from a tax incentive side. That's an approach. Thank you for the question.
Peut-être je vais rebondir avec Monsieur
I'll come back to Mr. Bergen. You said that this sector is not very attractive. The working conditions are not very good. So I'm presuming that if we use technology to lessen driver fatigue and make the job more pleasant, do you think that this is a way to attract people? Potential truckers might think that they won't arrive home as exhausted. Absolutely. There are ways to lessen driver fatigue. I've talked about the fact that some trucks are inadequate. Some truckers have said that they have to extend their trip and they have to find a place to sleep and to eat, and that's really frustrating for them. This sector is vital to our economy, but if the drivers are constantly exhausted and far away from their families, that's not helping. So anything to make the job more pleasant, be it through technology or any other way, would be a good thing. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Bergen, you mentioned among rail workers, you hear a lot of concerns about the scheduling and the nature of the shift work. I believe you called it the beck and call 24/7. It reminded me of some of the testimony we heard as part of the study, our study on rail safety from workers in the rail sector. And I was remembering a conversation with a young man in my home community who worked for the railroad for a short period of time, had one of his coworkers killed in a rail accident, and was just looking down the road at the risks inherent in that sector. I wonder the impact of the work environment in terms of safety and the impact that has on recruitment and retention of workers in the sector. Could you speak to that and how we address it?
I think to get a good perspective on that, it would be I've never worked in the rail sector, and I'm only starting to hear more and more stories. When I did start, I asked if I could ride, go on site and ride the train with one of the Teamster members, and I was told no, because the risk to your personal safety is too high. And it just it is a workplace where people have died, and every year we hear horrible stories. So I do think, it's definitely a sector where, if your personal safety is constantly at risk, it puts an inordinate amount of pressure, and I don't doubt that many would end up leaving because of that.
I was actually nodding to let you know, Mr. Bachrach, you had a minute left.
I have a minute left. Amazing. Okay, I'm going to ask the next question. You mentioned, Mr. Bergen, in the parcel sector that there are increasing expectations around productivity, and the numbers you shared were quite startling. Again, I'm wondering how the committee might get traction on that particular issue when it comes to the conditions of work through policy or legislation.
That's a good question. I don't know if my colleague, if Mariam, you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think very similar to the trucking industry when we're talking about working conditions where we want to attract women and youth and newer workers, not just youth. I mean, in terms of younger workers, but newer workers as well. The number of hours, I think there's definitely a consistency in what we hear from drivers, courier drivers, as well as freight drivers, about the hours of work and the demands or the pressures on their work-life balance. And I think that if we want to make it more attractive, we're going to have to start being much more creative around really addressing the issue and of work-life balance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Backrack, and thank you, Ms. Aboudib. Next, we have Mr. Generou. Mr. Generou, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for taking the time today to be here. I want to start first with the Trucking Association. The March 2020 report by Trucking HR Canada indicated high levels of voluntary turnover among truck drivers that contribute to labor shortages, obviously, in the profession. Curious as to why truck drivers are voluntarily leaving the profession, and if this is indicated by the age of the drivers.
Thanks for the question. I think people leave a profession for all types of reasons, but here's one is retirement, and I've mentioned that in my earlier comments. The other is the major reason people are leaving trucking companies, and I'm very familiar with Trucking HR Canada, who they survey, many of whom are on my board and throughout boards across Canada. Those drivers aren't leaving the industry. They're leaving a payroll, labor compliant company and going to the underground economy. And that is the major issue facing trucking companies across Canada, is they're losing good drivers and good people to the underground economy because they want to abide by the law, they're enforcing the law, and they're being abandoned by the law.
So
thank you for the question.
Yeah, is it then? I guess back to you, Ms. Lukowski. Is that predominantly then younger drivers? Because you started by saying it was the retirement age, but then indicated that it might be others. So just trying to get a ballpark on where on the spectrum these drivers are.
Well, in terms of going to the underground economy, it's all age groups. Yes, we do have the oldest age group, or the largest percentage of employees over the age of 55 in the drivers community, and that's contributing to people exiting the industry faster than other sectors. But with regards to the specific reference you're making in the Trucking HR Canada report, what you're seeing there, a big percentage of those drivers are leaving those companies, those labor compliant companies, and leaving and going to the underground economy.
And then want to follow up on some of my colleague Barso Duval's questions on the EV trucks and semi-trucks. I thought that was interesting, some interesting responses to that. In reviewing some of the research prior to this committee, by 2030 there's a number of organizations that are looking to move to significantly higher numbers of EV trucks. I think NMAX and Bison as a couple of those that have at least tested these vehicles. Curious as to what the thinking is within the industry, and maybe I'll start with Mr. Laskowski, and then maybe get some comments from you, Mr. Bergen, on what the potential is, plus and minus for the industry, but also with the obvious shortages. Is this an option that you guys are supporting?
Technology isn't going to replace truck drivers. It's the driver assist technology that's going to make truckers safe. The truck technology is by no means anywhere near remotely close to dealing with the driver shortage. It's simply not. It's going to make us safer. It might attract more people because the trucks will be safer to drive. The technology attracts the people, but it is by no means anywhere near addressing the issues we're talking today.
You said AV. I'm assuming you meant AI, as in driverless trucks, or
But yeah, AI.
yeah. I think we have a lot of questions about about safety, and I think we kind of feel the same way. I don't think that the technology is quite there yet. An analogy that is sometimes made is that for a long time we thought that we could have planes that could fly without a pilot, but I think most people would feel much better knowing that there's a pilot in the cockpit. It's the road. We just have a lot of questions about whether having driverless trucks. It's something that workers think about a lot. They feel, worried that they will be replaced. But especially with our winters and the roads that we have up here, I think I agree with the CTA that a lot of technology will just make driving safer and better.
Thank you very much, Mr. Généreux. Next, prochainement, nous avons Madame Koutrakis. Madame Koutrakis, la parole est à vous.
Ms. Fracas, you have the floor.
For appearing before our committee this afternoon, and thank you for your excellent testimony and great points that we should all take back and reflect on. I'm curious, and this question can go to any one of you. I'll start with Mr. Laskowski, because you touched upon this issue, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate, or if there are transportation sector labor shortages that are under the radar that may be particularly problematic if they go unaddressed. And I'm particularly looking to see if there are any safety issue concerns as a result of that.
A lot of us have talked about drivers, and it's the number one concern as we've talked about, because the issue here is that if we don't have a driver, the truck doesn't move, the freight doesn't move. We've all said that, and that's the reality. Perhaps one, I wouldn't necessarily, it's under the radar in our sector, but perhaps not talked about enough, is heavy duty mechanics. We have, just like in all sectors, we have labor shortages everywhere in the thing, but there is a significant shortage also on heavy duty diesel mechanics, and obviously keeping those trucks safe, keeping them in operating condition is the number one priority in our sector. And yes, that is another area that we are very interested in working with the Government of Canada and resolving.
I think we also feel that appropriate training, such as by recognizing truck drivers as a skilled trade, where they would have onboarding, where they'd have training in order to be safer drivers, would be a good thing. I think right now, as I mentioned, there was even a case in Quebec where people were selling fake licenses, and this is in part due to the shortage, because there's a lot of high demand for drivers, and this puts pressure and creates ways that people will just find ways to cheat and get someone behind the wheel. But we need people who are properly trained. In the rail sector, I think also, we need to make sure that standards are well, so we don't have high rates of exhaustion, which is a problem in the rail sector.
Actually, that's a great segue, because I'm worried about that. There's a labor shortage, but business must go on. So what happens now? Do you hear of complaints from, workers that are being forced by their employers to perhaps take on a separate, an additional shift? And that's what I'm concerned about. When I talk about under the radar, are we setting ourselves up for a higher risk in the short term? And what do you think, in your opinion, we can do to address some of those concerns? Can the federal government do something in that regard, or is it even a federal jurisdiction issue?
A lot of it is federal jurisdiction. I think I'll maybe ask my colleague, Mariam, if you have any comments on perhaps issues in the rail sector regarding safety.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Ministry of Transportation has talked about looking at specific fatigue regulations. We did get some new duty and rest rules, which we've been working with, and there are some issues that we have to resolve with them. But there does need to be a very, very focused study on fatigue and regulations that deal with fatigue, because that is a very real issue in the rail sector, and it is exacerbated by the fact that there is a shortage of and vacancies in that sector in and of itself. Accidents are happening. We have yet to really go through a significant period of time without a fatality. And I think it's really important to start thinking about fatigue as a symptom of an archaic industry that needs really quite the overhaul in and of itself.
So we've talked about the issues and the challenges that we are currently being, faced with the labor shortages. I'm just wondering if any one of you are aware of certain industries that have been especially effective at addressing labor shortages, and if so, can you provide us with some examples how they handle that?
Yeah, I'll jump in from the freight forwarding sector, and it may not be something we want to hear, but employers are moving the business out of Canada. They're moving it offshore. And, I had a conversation with one individual today who's indicated that they've moved, their equipment finally arrived in Serbia this week, and they're hiring MBA equivalent individuals at a rate of about $1,200 per month. These jobs are not going to return to Canada. So as we continue to have these labor-related shortages, and other countries are offering resources at prices that are attractive to employers, more and more of this is going to go on. This is not a new situation that's occurring, but this one organization, as we commented earlier in our opening remarks, moved their workforce. That it used to be 10% of the workforce was going offshore. It is now 25%. And I think that percentage is going to increase if we don't solve some of these labor-related issues that we have today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, and thank you, Ms. Koutrakis. Next, we have Mr. Dowdle. Mr. Dowdle, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too want to thank all the witnesses today for their testimony. Certainly an issue that I've heard lots about, even prior to the pandemic itself. I think it's been an issue in this industry, especially the trucking industry, of keeping, finding, and retaining drivers. I'm where I am in. I have Honda in my riding, so I have a lot of large trucking companies there, and this has been an issue. The one trucking company, for instance, I believe has 150 trucks. The average age is 61 of his drivers. So a huge issue. But I did grow up, wanted to be a hockey player, professional hockey player, or a truck driver, because there were good truck movies back then when we were growing up. I don't know if you remember Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood. So I don't know if we need some movies out again so that the youth will get into this again. But I think part of the problem might be, and we have this in Ontario as well when it comes to anybody in the trade field, that a lot of parents don't really push their kids to get into this field like they didn't in the trades, and now they realize through the trades that a lot of those individuals are making sometimes more money than the academics that have went through for certain university programs. So it is changing a little bit when it comes to trades here in Ontario. But I'm just wondering, in my thought, I think the reality is, no matter how you sum up the problem, the work, working there, the hours, the shift, to do long haul now. The next generation is not into that. They want to be home every single day. So I personally think the answer is, I just want to know what you think, is I think they have to be paid a lot of money, and more than what probably the average person would actually think a truck driver would get, in order to get those people, because it's such an important part of everything we do in every company and every, like you say, food, Leanne was saying, for the farming industry. Until that happens, I don't know. So I'm asking you, other than that, quite frankly, how can you get people to say, I want to be a truck driver?
I think you the nail on the head. I do think that good working standards will attract more people. If the salaries are higher, if people, feel like it's a good way to support their families and it's worth the sacrifice of perhaps being away from home, that they will more readily come if those jobs pay better. We have heard stories, for example, of some employers recognizing that people wanted more time off and working with the employees, with their union, and creating more creative scheduling. For example, having 3 12-hour days in a row and then 4 days off. And a lot of workers really like that. So it's both things. I think, if people can earn good money because they are the ones stepping up and making the sacrifice by doing a hard job, they'll come. And also if they feel their employers respond to their desire to have more work-life balance, they will like that and stay longer.
And also, I heard a lot of talk today about, I guess, unions and union truck drivers. I just want to recognize that even the small owner operators, I think, are pretty important. I had a lot in my riding prior to. A lot have gotten out of it because either the insurance, the fuel costs, or the wait times. Like we said already, the amount of time they waste if they're their own operator and that. So just a question, I guess, with fuel, because as we know, it's getting a lot more expensive. Is that going up? Is that money going to take away from money that perhaps we could pay or that company or that individual would make to pay to maybe stay in the industry? Or could it go to, like we heard earlier, when there's no training? Could there be an incentive somehow that would help too in the long run, as opposed to just paying more and you're not changing your vehicles? You're going to be driving the exact same vehicles, the same trucks. Crickets.
Does anybody want to answer that? Mr. Laskowski, Mr. Burgan, Mr. Rogers, Ms. Abudib?
So I just said there are multiple factors that attract and retain people. Monetary is one of them. Different, as the Teamsters recognize, different shift schedules. Many fleets are doing it, but the more flexible you get, the more, for example, some fleets are saying that do long haul. And what I mean by long haul, whether it's, Winnipeg, Texas, Toronto, Los Angeles, it's 1 week on, 1 week off. Well, that truck needs to move the next week. So that means you need double the drivers for the truck.
All I'm saying is, are the increases not affecting your ability to retain some of the employees or perhaps do some of that training? Like, this is money that's going out that you can't change all of a sudden. That it's going to cost us all more money, and it's not going to change probably the vehicle that driver is in. So I don't see where is the advantage to charging a lot more money now.
I'm not clear where to be honest with you, I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm not clear where we're going with this question, but the reality is that fuel has gone up. There's a separate system how fuel is captured, and there's costing of the carrier system, and including labor.
But will more people not go to the underground now because it's going to cost more to operate legally?
We'll have to save that one for perhaps Mr. Muse's time. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I want to welcome all the guests today. It's been great testimony, a very interesting information you've provided to all the members of this committee. Mr. Rogers, I'll ask you a question first off, and then I'll give the others a chance to respond. We have a lot of labor shortages occurring in many sectors. In the transportation sector, I know in the marine industry, for example, on the East Coast, there's a lot of there's a shortage of ships officers, for example, that are creating some real challenges for shipping companies. And also in the trucking industry, similar kinds of problems. So let me ask you this, Mr. Rogers. Are there particular aspects of the transportation sector that are unique when it comes to labor shortages? And if there are, can you possibly elaborate?
We're experiencing difficulty with the classification of a freight forwarder. And I don't believe that for the general population and a lot of maybe people around this table as well, really truly understand what a freight forwarder is. What we're trying to do is get that group classified under the National Occupation Classification Code, because currently today they are classified as shippers and receivers. And when you're looking to bring people into the country to train them on this, they only can come in on a temporary work permit, and they're only allowed to be here for up to 2 years. We're working with the NOC and trying to get them to change that classification to be more of a skilled position, whereby those individuals could come in and under the express entry system, obtain permanent residency and then move on into their workforce, into the careers in Canada. The challenge that we are faced with is the review of the NOC only occurs every 10 years. They do a little cursory review initially, but 10 years is before they do the major review. And from our perspective, that's taking too long, and we're trying to position that. The other challenge is, and we're talking about labor, and it's I won't belabor the point here, but we have significant equipment related issues as well that are going to be challenged. If we bring in 30,000 drivers, I'm not convinced we have the equipment in order to facilitate those drivers and keep them employed as time goes on. So I would say we are challenged in a number of different areas, and I don't think there's a really simple solution to any of them. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers and Mr. Bergen, would you want to comment on that? Is there something in particular that you think is creating our, when it comes to labor shortages?
I think again a trend that we're seeing a lot is that newer workers have different want something different out of their work, and they want more work-life balance. Is something that we hear a lot. Someone who my colleague John McCann is telling a story that someone he knew would start truck driving and then realize that he was going to be away all the time, and then say, it's not for me, I'm going to get an office job. So I think finding ways to, again, make it more attractive, because it's a tough job. It can be very hard, especially long hauls. And I think finding ways to make the work more attractive and evolve with the expectations of workers would be good for the industry.
Mr. Laskowski, today in the Globe and Mail, there's a story saying Loblaws put self-driving delivery trucks on Canadian roads for the first time. So I just want to ask you, how do we keep that in mind and properly calibrate the number of new employees we train with the extent of the labor shortage? And if so, for example, we do not inadvertently produce too many truck drivers, just as self-driving trucks start becoming more widely deployed. Can these situations be reliably predicted and planned for?
I'll just answer that short, Mr. Rogers. Thanks for the question. I don't think we have to be worried about creating too many truck drivers. Our economy needs them, and I don't think we have to worry about that technology that you're talking about in the Globe and Mail taking over our industry anytime soon, as I answered previously. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Time's up, unfortunately, Mr. Rogers.
Really?
I know you had an exciting line of questioning planned. Next, prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
We have Mr. Barcelou Duval, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, as I was listening to the conversation on the underground economy, it made me think of a story smaller trucks mean less investment, they're less expensive, and maybe it's easier to get that kind of license. Do you see that as the future of the industry? Well, for us, Uber is does not provide good jobs as far as we're concerned, and the people don't tend to remain as Uber drivers for the long haul. So, yes, we've seen some companies adopt more or less the same model as the one used by Uber, which means they exploit workers, they squeeze as many profits as possible as they can on the backs of the workers. They don't offer good working conditions, so it might be similar. Or rather, what you're describing is similar. And if that's the case, we have to really enforce the rules to make sure that companies don't cheat the system. Mr. Laskowski?
This is, in my opening remarks, I made mention about 2/3 of Canada-U.S. trade being moved by truck, and virtually everything in the room you're sitting in was on a truck at least once and probably multiple times. And most of those trucks are 53-foot trailers of various configurations or designs. So moving forward into the future, this nation will continue to move by truck and 53-foot tractor trailers.
10 seconds.
10 seconds left. Well, I think I'll pass. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Barcelot-Duval.
Back rack, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
I'm trying to get a handle on some of these trends that have been described, because we've heard a bunch about the conditions of work. We heard about work-life balance. We heard about the lack of rest areas, the lack of food services available, the downward pressure on wages and benefits from this underground economy. All of these things seem to be like negative aspects of the conditions of work. At the same time, earlier it was mentioned that driver pay has increased in the past couple of years. I think the number cited was 20 to 30%. And so I'm wondering what the net trend is. Are the conditions of work worsening? Are they worse than they were 30, 40 years ago, when you had, the drivers who are now retiring, leaving the industry back in their heyday? Were the conditions better? Truck stops, every 10 miles and home to see the family every 3 days? Or have the expectations of the workforce changed, and so the industry is chasing those expectations? Or is this just simply a tight labor market, like across the board throughout the economy? I'm trying to understand what is the specific trend we're trying to get some traction on with policy.
I think it's probably a little bit of everything. When you work in the labor movement, you know that you get the answers by asking workers what they think, and so that's what we did. And they're telling us these are the things that are keeping newer workers from coming in. These are the worst parts of the job that are getting to a point where it's a breaking point. Whether it was, I'm guessing some of these were way better. For example, we talk about rest stops. It's an infrastructure issue, if the economy moved a certain way where there's way more trucks on the road, which from what I understand is the case, and no one ever took to improving the rest stops for trucks, then you just reach a breaking point, you reach a crisis. So I think it's probably a combination of a lot of things.
20 seconds.
Mr. Laskowski, the same question, just his take on the overall direction of the trend when it comes to the conditions of work. Say, looking at a truck driver who was working 40 years ago versus one that's entering the workforce today.
I'm sorry, was that question directed to me, to CTA?
Sure.
Yeah,
please.
So the biggest trend, without question, and you've heard it from the Teamsters and CTA, is the unlevel playing field created by the non-enforcement of Driver Inc. The reason labor, you can introduce all the labor laws you want to improve the sector, but if 20 to 30% of the sector is saying, I'm not following anything you currently have on the books and you're doing nothing about it, what does it matter if you add new laws? It's just new laws that they won't follow. So I think what you're hearing today, if we want to improve our sector, what we're asking you jointly, both labor and the CTA member companies, is enforce the law from the CRA and ESDC's perspective and we will move our industry forward with better working conditions for all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Sure, and I think I'll ask one question and then share my time with my colleague, MP Rood. So we talked about working conditions, and both the freight forwarders and the Teamsters referenced, of course, rest areas and needs to use the bathroom, and that's obviously maybe a small point, although I would imagine, it's a significant frustration on top of other issues, and it exacerbates the working conditions. And I know in Ontario during the pandemic, there was a mandate from the provincial government that required businesses that were receiving deliveries by truck to make their bathroom facilities available to drivers to make use of those. So it seems like a very practical solution to a problem. And you referenced infrastructure on rest areas. I mean, not just using washroom facilities, but I would imagine rest areas where you can rest if there's fatigue. That's it. And is there other things, without treading on provincial jurisdiction, the federal can do to alleviate that problem for both the Teamsters and the freight forwarders who mentioned that issue as well?
Yeah, I'll speak for the freight forwarders. So the group that we're representing is the drayage companies, and these are the people that pick up the containers from the rail yards and from the ports, and they deliver them ultimately to the importers or exporters, whoever needs those containers. The reference that we were making is the long lineups due to the congestion issues today, as these drivers are sitting there for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. Basically, they're just sitting on the side of the highway trying to get into a yard in order to either pick up the container or drop one off. That is problematic for the industry. It's not necessarily to a rest area, because these drivers are just sitting there waiting, and it's a problem with the system, and it's a problem with the congestion that's going on. So I would say from that aspect, there's really nothing from a federal perspective we're looking for, and I'll turn it over to the CTA to offer further comment.
From our perspective, if you're looking for something that the federal government could do to assist the drivers, it is in assisting on more rest areas along federal infrastructure, especially with the ELD regulation. What that means is there will be no more paper logbooks, and we're going to move to electronic logbooks, something both CTA and the Teamsters strongly support.
Okay.
It's going to make our roads safer and protect labor.
I'm going to cut you off so that my colleague can use the balance of the time.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I heard from many trucker groups during recently that the cross-border, there was a cross-border issue when the government imposed the federal mandates and people chose to exercise their medical autonomy and choose not to be vaccinated. There was a shortage of truck drivers that would do cross-border runs. And I saw this in the springtime with getting food from California into Canada with produce. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on whether or not those federal mandates led to the part of the reason we have a labor shortage in this sector currently, and if it damaged Canada's supply chain. Maybe Mr. Lukowski?
So those mandates were bilateral, introduced by both Canada and the United States. It had an impact of reducing 10% approximately, some areas of the country higher, but if you had on average about 10% of the driving force out of the US-Canada market, so that's not insignificant. Since then, as of last week, Canada has rescinded that. Unfortunately, the United States have not. So we still have an impact in Canada of approximately 10% of drivers out of that driving pool. So that's my answer.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Rogers, was there an impact in your sector as well with these mandates?
Sorry, there was initially, but it was quickly recovered, and we are not experiencing those type of problems at the present time.
Thank you very much. I guess I'll just close with saying thank you, Mr. Lukowski, for that information. From what I heard from the industry is because of the competitiveness of not having drivers, it actually drove the price up for freight for people looking to get trucks. When they couldn't get somebody to come across the border, or they secured a trucking company to bring their load across, if somebody else bid higher, they were dropping the other loads and taking the higher bid because they could get the money because they're in the business of making money, I guess, as well. So I'll just close with that. Thank you, Chair. I know my time is up.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rood. Lastly, we have Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to concentrate on, I guess, a dialogue that we can speak on outside the box. Not looking at what was, but what can be. And what I mean by that is that we have two interim reports that we completed on the establishment of a Canadian transportation and logistics strategy. And I'm sure you folks have been a part of that process. At least some of you have, or you know the reports that I'm referring to. I guess the second comment is that if we're going to strengthen our trade corridors and we are going to, in fact, integrate our distribution logistics, the human resource element is a big part of that. The infrastructure is a big part of that. Policy legislation is a big part of that. Partnerships are a big part of that. And it's not just here domestically, but it's binationally, if not trinationally. The fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, to strengthen our overall global trade performance, we have to have all the boxes checked off. With that said as well, the dialogue is important, as we're having today. So let's talk outside the box. Let's discuss outside the box. So when we look at the need for operators in trade corridors, it's not just operators as it relates to those on the road. It's also operators for those that are on rail, in the air, as well as on the water. As much as the industry on the road is talking about the need for operators, the marine industry is saying the same thing. Whether it's a cook, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a captain, whether it's a mate, it's the same situation, the dire situation. And with that, rail, the same, and air, somewhat the same, especially within the supply chain, as well as those that are working with luggage or working on the gates or in airports and things of that nature. So my question, Mr. Rogers, is going to be to you as a freight forwarder. Do you feel that there may be an opportunity to bundle a branding exercise that looks after operators as it relates to trade corridors, including road operators, marine operators, airport operators, as well as rail? So rail, water, road, and air. Secondly, is to bundle the resources. What I mean by that is that, working with the provinces to bundle training, as well as harmonize provincial program training across the country, because as we know, those training, exercises, for lack of a better word, can differ from province to province, and harmonize the training program nationally. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I believe that would be beneficial and simplify the process for our community and the community we represent. Again, in the freight forwarding sector, a lot of these organizations, they're national and multinational type organizations. They have staff in multiple provinces across Canada, and when we have the inconsistencies of training, it creates significant problems overall. To bundle it up as a basically dealing with the supply chain issues and the supply chain labor shortages, I think that would be a significant first step to solve this issue.
Taking it a step further, when we look at the integration of distribution logistics internationally, so therefore when an investor or a company comes in from out of the country, most of which are going to be aligned with the trade agreements that we've established and ratified within the last 4 years, whether it be the Canada-U.S., whether it be CETA, CPTPP, others. When we look at that new way of doing business in that new global market that we find ourselves in within the last few decades, do you find that to do that, it's going to be a new age, as we integrate our distribution logistics systems of transportation, and therefore a new age of operators. So therefore, again, going back to my earlier question, not only the bundling of training, but also the bundling of branding and the overall need, getting the word out there with the overall need of trade corridor operators, regardless of what sector they might find themselves in, rail, road, water, or air.
I think that's essential. But I'm going to take this in a somewhat different tide. It's along the lines that you're referencing as well. From our perspective, we've got a national trade corridors fund, but we don't have a national trade corridor strategy. I think we've got it backwards. We put the money out there, then we go out to the interested parties and say, okay, who wants it? Everybody put in a bid, and you go that way. Nobody's looking at the infrastructure. So the labor component as well goes hand in hand with the infrastructure issues that we have and that we're challenged with today. We talked earlier on from our presentation about the challenges with the congestion at the rail yards. Who wants to be a driver when you're sitting in line for 5 hours? How many weeks are you going to do this on end before you give it up? I don't want to do this anymore. We've got the same issues at our ports. They are landlocked. We've got infrastructure projects that have been sitting in additional studies now for going on for 15, 20 years. We need quicker decisions. We need a national trade corridor strategy, and the labor component should be part of that as well.
Just to refer to the analysts, we want to underline and bold that comment with respect to trade corridors and transportation strategy. And thank you, Mr. Rogers, for that comment. And I guess my last question, Mr. Rogers, and I'm sure you read the Emerson report, the CTA report, and of course the recommendations that come out of that. And do you feel strongly that as part of that establishing of a Canadian transportation and logistics strategy, and what Mr. Emerson talks about in his report, that in fact it's not just the obvious investments and or attention that we have to give to infrastructure, and whether it be the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Welland Canal, whether it be roads in terms of the hard infrastructure, but the human resource, as we're speaking about today, is a great part of that as well.
I'm just going to quite simply say we agree. The labor component it's got to go hand in hand with the infrastructure strategy that we're talking about. We've got to get the proper infrastructure in place. It has to support the supply chain challenges that we're faced with today, and the labor component. If it's not tied to that, we are not solving any of the issues overall. So labor component has to be a significant part of that as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badaway. If it's agreeable with members, I would like to ask a question to the witnesses. Just one, brief. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. So there was a study that came out recently where they asked the next generation, younger workers entering the workforce, what they were looking for in employment. And the number one thing they were looking for was a sense of fulfillment, something that they felt like they were contributing to something positive. Second was a work-life balance, so quality of life. And third was a positive impact on the environment. So they wanted to make sure what they were doing didn't have a negative impact. The trucking industry, for many younger workers, is seen as an industry that is not environmentally friendly. And I'm wondering if there was greater efforts put in, perhaps support from the federal government, different levels of government, to help the industry transition to technologies such as electric vehicles, trucks, for example. Not only would that help with the bottom line, obviously, for the trucking industry with regards to savings in fuel, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that transition helping attract those younger workers to the sector and putting it more in a positive light. And I'm looking for any reflections from any of you.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. I'll jump in, but just very similar to some of the questions around the technology and around driver assist or driverless vehicles. The same thing with electric vehicles. Our members, the number one cost next to labor is fuel. So if our members could move to electric vehicles, they would. The reality is the technology is not there for our long haul economy, nor is it there for our weights and standards and the weights and volumes that are moved in these vehicles. So the Canadian Trucking Alliance is extremely supportive and is working with the Government of Canada towards this. But the technology is just not there to move the economy that is in our customer base, both in Canada and the United States, on electric vehicles at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Lewkowski. Anybody else want to chime in?
Just quickly, I think, Labor believes in a just transition, and we don't think that workers should find themselves without work as a result of transitioning. But we do have a climate crisis, and I think, when workers are taken into consideration with government programs for greening the economy, I think everyone wins.
Seeing no other responses, I want to thank you all on behalf of this committee for your testimony today and contributing to this very important study for all Canadians. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.